Hey, it's great to be with you all again. It's been 3 years since we had this Hunger Summit last before the pandemic, and it is good to see most of your faces again. And, I'm not going to call out the ones, JC, that it's not good to see. I'm just kidding. But it's good to see you. I'm glad to see you beyond just a little square on our Zoom cameras. You all are doing some amazing work. Well, my name is Jeremy Everett. I serve as the Executive Director of the Baylor Collaborative on Hunger and Poverty. And I remember the early days that Chris was talking about. Bill Ludwig, who is the Regional Administrator of USDA's Federal Nutrition Service team, and I would travel around the state of Texas trying to whip up support for building hunger-free community coalitions. Many of you lead those coalitions on the local level now. And then we didn't have a whole lot. We didn't have a whole lot of training tools in our toolbox at that time, and so we would invite people back to campus. And Chris Olson would lead community organizing training for our communities who are our early adopters for our hunger-free community work. So, Chris, it's an honor to have you as our board chair, and McLean team. Marissa is right. We had no idea what to expect over the next decade. And Rachel Cooper, who was with Every Texan, J.C. Dwyer, who was with Feeding Texas, and Marissa and I would have a lot of talks on those cold, dark days in D.C. trying to think through how in the world are we going to make some progress in addressing hunger in a comprehensive way. So it is good to be in the room with you today. Now, we all know that hunger in our nation is largely experienced episodically. We see food insecurity rates raise and rise towards the end of a pay period, and families are forced to make trade-offs each month. They have to decide, am I going to pay for my medical expenses, child care expenses, housing, or food? During the pandemic, economic instability was at an all-time high. We saw periodic closures to businesses, health risk and fear for leaving the home, and so people lost jobs. People did not have a steady state of income. My friend Eric Cooper, who runs the San Antonio Food Bank, showed me a picture, and the picture was one that ended up in the front cover of the New York Times, and it was the picture that we all probably saw at the beginning of the pandemic. 4 weeks to the day after the shutdown, he had 50,000 people in line to receive food at the San Antonio Food Bank. Now, typically they would serve 50,000 people a week, but during the pandemic, they were serving 50,000 people a day. So how did we mitigate a hunger disaster? Because by the end of the year, our food insecurity rate was at the same level it was prior to the pandemic. We mitigated it because of you. You all stepped up. In Texas, you set up 10,500 grab-and-go sites and served 125 million meals to children alone when the schools shut down during the pandemic. You launched, with groups like McLean Global and PepsiCo, Chartwells, and the Baylor team, a Meals to You program that served 270,000 children a day in America's most remote regions, serving 40 million meals to kids during the shutdown. You set up key legislation that expanded programs like the Child Income Tax Credit, which cut child poverty in half. So if we've wondered if cash-based transfers work as a poverty-reducing tool, I think we all know now, absolutely. You passed universal free school meals so that all of our children and their families wouldn't have the burden of providing meals, and our schools at USDA's partnership were able to do so. You supported the largest increase in global hunger funding ever in the history of America. So why is our country great? It's because you're great. For some people, the pandemic was an opportunity to catch up and binge watch on shows on Netflix, but for you, it meant 100-hour work weeks, working tirelessly to ensure that all people in your community had access to adequate food so that they could live an active, healthy lifestyle. So thank you, and I am glad that you're here. Right now, give yourself an applause for all the work that you've done. So as Chris mentioned, the Collaborative's mission statement is to cultivate scalable solutions to end hunger. We do that by combining research and public policy with practice. As Brian Stevenson says, you can't solve a social problem from a distance. You have to have proximity to the problem. And we believe in that proximity. You all, many of you, represent that proximity. We have 24,000 organizational partners at the Collaborative who are doing the daily grind of ensuring that people have access to food on a daily basis. And we believe when you pair that with research, that's where we begin to find out what scalable solutions actually are. We also operate from a foundational premise that no one organization or sector can end hunger by themselves. The problem is simply too large and complex for one of us to end alone. Our only chance to promote a food-secure America or a food-secure world is if we get government, industry, nonprofits, faith communities, and even universities working together in a collaborative capacity to end hunger. Well, that's why you're here today, and that's why you're spending the week with us. You have come to the table to work together to end hunger in Texas and in the United States and around the world. And we're glad that you're here. We look forward to listening to you and learning from you and collaborating with you over the next 3 days to see how we can collectively bend the world towards justice. I hope that these next few days will be deeply meaningful, intellectually meaningful in your soul, your spirit, and also meaningful, you'll leave with meaningful ways that you can go expand your capacity with your organization on addressing hunger back in your community. This is our 8th summit, and this would not have happened if generous sponsors would not have set the table for us. So I would like to recognize the Hormel Company. Can you raise your hands if you're from the Hormel Company? There we go. Thank you all for your generous sponsorship. PepsiCo. Where's our PepsiCo guy? There we go. All right. We are glad that you're here. McLean Hunger Solutions and McLean Global, if you'll raise your hand. All right. Thank you. The Thrive Restaurant Group, right here up front. Okay, great. In the back. Glad that you're here. And Emoja, a new company providing medically tailored meals to people all over the country. Thank you. I also want to say thanks and welcome to our first gentleman and our second gentleman. Brad Livingstone, the president's husband, is here with us today. Brad, if you'll raise your hand. All right, and then Dr. Mark Brickhouse. Mark, where are you? I saw it. There he is. Mark's in the back. So the two of them, so Brad serves on the board of World Hunger Relief, and he helped lead a sponsorship campaign for us this summer to recruit more summer meal sponsors. And so we are grateful to him providing his leadership and lending it to our cause. We're also grateful to Mark. Mark has been one of our researchers and evaluators to ensure the efficacy of our Meals to You program. So these guys aren't just arm candy. They are in the fight to end hunger, and so we are. They're that too. That's right. So thank you. We're also grateful. So President Livingstone and Provost Brickhouse are together in California today, and they both send their regards. But we have achieved greater heights as a university than I think any of us ever thought possible. Under their leadership, we are now an R1, a Research 1 university, which is incredible. We've won national championships in men's and women's sports, and we've just completed a $1 billion fundraising campaign. So I think what that means is that y'all need to go ask the two of them for money for Beach Up before you leave. Well, today is a special day because we are about to hear the inaugural Carol Hanks Lecture. We are excited to kick off the summit with this first installment, which will be given by Stacy Dean, the Undersecretary of the United States Department of Agriculture. Bill Ludwig will come and introduce her shortly. But first, I want to talk to you a little bit about Dr. Carol Hanks. Before retiring, Dr. Hanks had a distinguished 42-year career of service in public health, including a time as the director of the Nurse Family Partnership Research Program. She also was a faculty member of Baylor University's Louise Harrington School of Nursing, and she worked with veterans suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder through the Veterans Affairs Medical Center here in the community. Before Alzheimer's disease ended her professional and volunteer activities, Dr. Hanks worked in a program at Lakeshore Baptist Church, which connected mothers experiencing poverty with resources available to them throughout the community. The Carol Hanks Lecture is designed for policymakers, administrators, practitioners, and leaders from across the field who are working towards the common good to share big ideas on how to create conditions that help the most marginalized among us flourish. So we are grateful to Dr. Hanks and to Dr. Carol Hanks. Dr. Hanks, would you mind standing so everybody can greet you and thank you for this inaugural lecture? If you've been around campus long, you know who Dr. Hanks is. He is a legend at Baylor University. And I remember the first time I met him, he had his top hat on, and he walked into the Common Grounds coffee shop where my wife Amy was working as a college student at that time, and he literally had a drink named after him. He was so famous in Waco. And so he was Waco famous before Waco famous was actually a thing. And so Dr. Hanks, thank you for your partnership with this, and it's an honor to honor your wife with this inaugural lecture. I'd like to introduce Bill Ludwig to come up, and Bill is going to introduce the Undersecretary to us. Now, you've all got note cards on your table as he's coming. I want you to see your note cards. So Stacy is a phenomenal public speaker, and she is somebody who is working in the leadership role, overseeing all of our anti-hunger work for the federal government in the United States. And so we have opportunity for you to ask her questions. And so if you'll write down your question, we will have staff that will walk around and pick up the cards, and then Dr. Kathy Cry will be facilitating the Q&A after Stacy gives her remarks. All right, thank you. Bill. Right here.
Thank you, Jeremy. And I have to say, it is so good to see people again. We haven't traveled at USDA Food and Nutrition Service for going on 2 years. It's kind of like the lost 2 years of my life. We're now traveling again, and it's great to be out and see everybody. I've got a couple stories I want to share with you. The first one is about Baylor. In 2009, I got a call from my staff and said, there's some gentleman with the Baptist Seminary wants to come and see you. And I said, well, what does he want? And he said, well, I don't know, but he's come recommended by the Baptist Seminary, and he has something to do with Baylor. And I said, well, set up a meeting. So a couple of weeks later, here comes this guy, this long, tall drink of water, and it looked like a kid. And I said, well, what can I help you do? And he said, do you know what the statistics are for hunger in Texas? I said, yeah, I do. I'm responsible for hunger in Texas. Well, he went on to read all these statistics and on about hunger in Texas. And I said, what is it that you want me to do? What can I help you do? And he said, well, I'm going to address hunger in Texas. Well, that's a good start. I said, how are you going to do that? And he said, I'm going to create an initiative. And I said, okay, what is the initiative? He said, it's the Texas Hunger Initiative. I thought, well, that kind of going around in circles. You want to start an initiative in Texas, and you're going to call it the Texas Hunger Initiative. So I said, all right, whatever I can do to help you, just let me know. And he left, and I said, where did that guy come from? And so it wasn't a month later, my staff came in to see me and said, hey, you know that guy from the Baptist Seminary that's at Baylor? he wants you to meet him in the valley, and he's going to have a meeting down there with all the pastors in the South Texas, and he's going to talk to them about hunger, and he wants you to come. And I said, okay, I'll go. So I went down there, and come to find out, I saw that long drink of water again, Jeremy, and we got to talking, and he was telling me his grandfather was a pastor, his father was a pastor, and I said, son, you need to be a pastor. Well, that started a long, great relationship with Jeremy and the Texas Hunger Initiative. Jeremy and I traveled all over Texas. We trying to address hunger. We had more meetings for 3 years. And then one day Jeremy come to me and he said, hey, what do you think about changing the name of the Texas Hunger Initiative? And I said, Jeremy, have you lost your mind? We've been working 3 years just to get the name out there. I said, why would you want to change the name? And he said, well, I want to go beyond Texas. I want to go nationwide. I said, Jeremy, I can't go outside my region. So I said, all right, what are you going to call this new initiative? He said, the Baylor Collaborative on Hunger and Poverty. I said, Jeremy, my mouth's not that big. So he did. It has been extremely successful from the day that it was a thought in Jeremy's mind in my office in 2009 to where we are today. And I just have to congratulate Jeremy, his staff, and Baylor for creating such an outstanding program. The other story I want to quickly tell you is about my boss. One of the things she told me yesterday was, do not read my bio. I get so tired of hearing my bio. So I said, okay, I wasn't planning on reading her bio anyway. It is kind of boring. It really is. But back in the mid-1990s, I had an opportunity to meet this young lady. I was in Washington, D.C. I was brand new. I was with the Clinton administration, and I didn't know what I was doing in Washington, but I was there. And I hadn't been in the job but a couple weeks, and we got a call that we had to go over and testify on Congress. Well, I was from Louisiana, and I've testified before the state legislature numerous times. Oh, this won't be anything. Plus, I've got all these experts here with food and nutrition that can help me when I go over. So we got to calling around. Guess what? Everybody was on vacation. So I thought, man, I can't go over there by myself. I don't even know how to get there. So they sent up a lady by the name of Stacy Dean. And I said, whoa, great, this young lady, I know she knows what she's doing. So I was talking to her, and come to find out, she's on a detail from OMB. She's not even with FNS. And they've sent her over to go with me to the Hill to testify on stuff that I really don't understand yet because I hadn't been here long enough. So Stacy and I, just the two of us, went to the Hill and we testified. And I want to tell you, I knew it was successful because we not only made Congress mad, we made the White House mad. And when you can make both of them mad, you've done a good job. And so Stacy went back to OMB, and I stayed there at FNS, and then I left, and I never heard much from Stacy, but I'd hear about her when I'd meet with people. I had heard that she had married one of the guys that had worked with FNS, and that she had gone to work at the Center on Budget, Policy, and Priorities. That's kind of like the Baylor Collaborative on Hunger and Poverty. I have to read it. I can't, my mouth's not that big. But as I would go and meet with advocates throughout the years, it's been 30 years now, I'd meet with advocates, and I keep hearing about Stacy. I'd say, you know, I knew her at one time. And they'd say, well, we want to make changes in the program. We want to expand the program. I'd say, you know, the only way you can do that is through Congress. And they go, oh, I know Stacy. I go, I used to know Stacy. This went on for years and years. I kept hearing about Stacy. And then many years later, here we are a couple years ago, and I hear Stacy's gonna be my boss. Well, I think I was Stacy's boss at one time. I hope she's as good to me as I was good to her. But it is an honor to be able to introduce Stacy. Stacy's fingerprints are on every major piece of hunger legislation in the United States for the last 30 years. But even more important than that, Stacy is the best friend of every disadvantaged child in America because what she's done to address childhood poverty. And guess what? They don't even know her name. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to introduce Stacy Dean.
Oh my goodness, you got me tearing up as you're introducing me. That's really sweet. Thank you so much, Bill. I love Bill because he remembers me when I was young. So that's what we see when we see each other. It's wonderful. Thank you so much to the Baylor team for inviting me here today. I am really grateful to be speaking to people focused on ending poverty and hunger. And it's just wonderful to see so many people that I've known over the years, whose work I've admired from afar. You have come together for the purpose of driving towards a more equitable and just world. And it really does a good person good to be here with you. So thank you for including me. And of course, it is truly an honor to be invited by the Baylor Collaborative on Hunger and Poverty to give the inaugural lecture, the Dr. Carol Hanks lecture. She sounds like an extraordinary person, and I'll see if I can do her and you justice. And I just want to flag that, as you all very likely know, that Baylor and Jeremy and the team here are critical leaders in the national conversation about how we find solutions to hunger and poverty. And we're grateful so much for their work and their voice. It's truly an honor to be here. All right, so finding solutions to hunger and poverty are big, ambitious goals. And this administration shares those goals. We, like you, are not shying away from lofty ambition, whether it's addressing climate change, building a just and equitable economy, curing cancer, or tackling hunger and poverty. None of us are going to solve these issues tomorrow, but we will never solve them if we do not try. We will never move forward if we do not name and understand what is driving hunger and poverty, if we do not set our sights on a better future, and if we do not work together to forge that path. And that's what makes a gathering like this so important. Gatherings like this remind us we're not laboring alone. I mean, you can feel it. We are not alone. In this room, we have hundreds of people from a wide variety of sectors and perspectives coming together to discuss what each of us can do alone, what we can do through our organizations, and even more important, what we can do together through collaboration to tackle hunger and poverty. So today I'd like to share my perspective on how USDA is approaching this work, some of our key priorities in terms of food and nutrition security policy work, as well as the how of the way we want to do our work. I'm leaving lots of time for Q&A because I think the real expertise is in this room, and I suspect it'll be a really spirited exchange. All right, so ensuring our neighbors and communities have economic security, are well-nourished, advancing health through sound nutrition, these are important endeavors. We only need to look at the pandemic for a recent and impactful example of the ability of our country to come together to overcome great adversity and to better serve the public. And I think Jeremy ticked through great examples of that here in Texas. We really have a lot to learn by taking a step back and reflecting on the past few years to identify our successes and how we can build on those lessons. We also need to examine what didn't work, which structures may not have benefited everyone, and how to better reach those most in need of dietary support. In 2020, when COVID-19 began, we faced urgent problems on a monumental scale, including persistent poverty and crippling rates of food insecurity. When the president took office in 2021, a staggering 29 million people across the country, including 12 million kids, were experiencing food insufficiency based on the Census Pulse Survey. The president at the time challenged the cabinet agencies to both address immediate need and pave a path to an economic recovery that is more equitable and just for all Americans, regardless of their background. He told us that it's not enough to return to where we were. We must set our sights on a better tomorrow, a stronger, better equipped, more equitable nation. He said, we will build back better. Now, poverty and food insecurity were not new problems, but they certainly were exacerbated as the pandemic caused enormous economic and public health crises that reverberated across the nation. And they're problems that continue to disproportionately impact some more than others, including communities of color and those living in rural areas, home to 1/5 of the nation's population. And as many of you probably know, there's a clear correlation between food insecurity and chronic diet-related disease, putting those experiencing food insecurity at a higher health risk. To put it plainly, the last couple of years served as a stark eye-opener, thrusting long-standing problems like poverty, hunger, nutrition insecurity, and systemic inequities into the limelight. Now, this probably isn't anything new for all of you. I mean, here you are spending 3 days of your life to talk about these very issues. But I believed it really raised awareness for many Americans and many policymakers about the economic fragility and the structural drivers of disparity across numerous metrics, economic, food security, health in our country. And there's just really, to my mind, been a powerful call for change. This has also been a period, as Jeremy pointed out, of extraordinary perseverance and innovation, of thinking outside of the box for ways to lift families up and keep our country moving forward. We've witnessed heroic action on the ground, promising changes to existing and new nutrition assistance programs, impressive private sector support, all of which helped us to do something pretty incredible in the food and nutrition space. At a time when our country was deeply in need of assistance, we were able to activate and bolster the food safety net to curb dramatic spikes in hunger that would have otherwise been expected. We took bold action, and it had impressive results. So in that way, COVID-19 underscored the importance of the federal nutrition programs. USDA and our partners, like many of you here in this room, took swift, tangible steps to increase nutrition assistance benefits across our programs, expand meaningful access to those programs, and reach the homes and lives of those who've been underserved for generations. From a national policy perspective, the Biden-Harris administration has leveraged nutrition assistance programs to best meet this unprecedented need. So, for example, shortly after taking office, we took action to ensure that the SNAP pandemic emergency benefits, or emergency allotments as they're called, which are designed to provide extra aid during the public health emergency. We took action to make sure that they weren't leaving behind those most in need, because they had previously only been, previously basically excluded the poorest households on SNAP. So we made a public policy change that ensured that an extra $1 billion a month across an estimated 25 million of the lowest income SNAP participants were able to go out. We also leveraged and expanded Pandemic EBT, a program designed to provide households with a SNAP-like payment to cover the cost of lost school meals when children are out of school due to COVID or during the summer months. It's temporarily allowed states to issue benefits, it's temporarily allow states to issue these benefits during the public health emergency. This helped families stretch their benefits and to be able to afford food. And we just heard about that this morning at the Jubilee Market. A cashier told me a story of a mom crying when she found out that pandemic EBT benefits had been loaded onto her card, and she had that much more in grocery dollars to buy food for her kids. To date, that program alone has delivered more than $50 billion in food buying benefits for low-income children, and 50 states applied to participate in that program this summer, and it worked. The PEBT program has been shown to decrease food insufficiency for low-income households with kids by 30% in the period after the benefit issuance. At the same time, we leveraged important flexibilities and added resources to school meals, WIC, emergency food. And as a result of our efforts, as Jeremy pointed out, food insecurity largely held steady in 2021 relative to 2020 under the Census Bureau's measures. And it even dropped for some groups. So absent government intervention, we would have expected much higher rates of hardship. And of course, absent your intervention, we would have similarly expected to see much higher rates of hardship. Now, to more broadly support families in need, the administration introduced meaningful measures like the child tax credit, a much needed boost in that benefit. And census data showed for 2021 that the child tax credit kept more than 5 million people above the poverty line, and it helped drive a stunning reduction in child poverty to a record low. These efforts across government prevented massively higher financial hardship in 2021 as the nation continued to wrestle with the COVID-19 pandemic and recover from the resulting job loss. The poverty and food insecurity data for 2021 show that the nation knows how to reduce poverty and to broaden opportunity. We just simply know. Temporary government supports drove progress in poverty reduction, health coverage, and food security. And so these successes really have to inform our pathway forward. Meanwhile, innovation, in addition to what government was doing, innovations were happening on the local level all across the country as program operators and partners leveraged USDA programs and pandemic flexibilities. So for example, we saw in Virginia, a WIC office created a drive-through farmers market to help rural participants access the program and fruits and vegetables safely. DoorDash partners with food banks across the country to deliver food boxes to seniors who were not able to make it to pickup sites. Wisconsin's Department of Agriculture partnered with food banks and indigenous growers who were struggling with supply chain issues to develop a supplemental food box for tribal elders made up of traditional foods. We saw schools delivering meals across bus routes, partners doing outreach, connecting folks to services, retailers prioritizing bringing SNAP online purchasing into their business model. And Baylor's Meals to You program is a perfect prime example of that local innovation. Actions like these and countless others have helped to mitigate food insecurity during the pandemic. But these types of out-of-the-box, participant-focused efforts need not be limited to times of extreme need and crisis. We've got to take all of that learning forward. So I can't underscore enough some of the core lessons related to understanding the breadth and depth of disparity, though. We all recognize food insecurity are the results of larger systemic issues that drive poverty and hardship. Put another way, food insecurity is really a downstream problem, right? Low wages, unaffordable rent, unaffordable childcare, and so many other barriers to economic stability. So that's why I'm so pleased that the administration has been working to increase access to high-quality, affordable childcare, preschool, healthcare coverage, and housing, higher minimum wage, and expanded refundable tax credits. I see these investments as anti-hunger proposals because they create economic security and opportunity. Investments in these areas would lift up Americans so we can come out of the pandemic stronger than where we were before. It's a commitment. It's essentially our commitment to building back better, to finding ways to leverage lessons learned from COVID, to strengthen our programs and ensure that they provide the services that are meaningful, equitable, and resilient. Now, the experience of the pandemic also informed our desire to integrate nutrition security as a foundational to USDA efforts to move towards a brighter future. Like food insecurity, nutrition insecurity has long existed, but it was brought to the forefront by COVID-19. One study estimated that 2/3 of COVID-19 hospitalizations in the US were related to obesity, diabetes, hypertension, and heart failure. The same study estimated that 1/3 of deaths were also associated with diet-related disease. And COVID aside, poor nutrition is a leading cause of illness in the United States, currently responsible for more than 600,000 deaths per year. Nearly 3 in 4 adults are overweight or obese, while 1 in 2 have diabetes or prediabetes. Obesity and type 2 diabetes are rising amongst children. All of these figures are terrible, but they are even worse among communities of color and those with low income. So it's become increasingly clear our nation's health is at an inflection point. Simply put, a focus on equity demands that we integrate a nutrition security focus into our work. The notion that these two issues, food security and nutrition security, are at odds with one another is just false. We need to do both, and we need to do both really well. So the dual commitment to food and nutrition security is one of the reasons that I am so proud to be a part of the Department of Agriculture, a department that invests 70% of our budget into ensuring access to healthy and safe food for tens of millions of Americans who participate in our programs. We have an extraordinary footprint and a platform from which to drive work on food and nutrition security. We reach 41 million Americans through SNAP, 30 million children each day through school lunch and breakfast, and nearly half of all infants from the U.S. are on the WIC program. And this is working with 99,000 schools and 250,000 retailers. Our breadth and depth of reach is pretty impressive. And this is in addition to our nutrition programs, we spend more than $1 billion a year on nutrition education and promotion efforts. And we work on the dietary guidelines through and interpret it through My Plate, and have much broader investments in research. So we have an incredible platform from which to drive food and nutrition security. And we are doing that under the rubric of 4 pillars. The first is providing meaningful support from pregnancy to birth and beyond. The second is connecting all Americans with healthy, safe, affordable food sources. The third is developing, translating, and enacting nutrition science through partnership. And the fourth is prioritizing equity every step of the way. So I want to emphasize that all of our work is driven by science and grounded in research. And let me give you one example of the work that we're doing in this space. In SNAP, our largest program, we've put policy in place that enable more families to put nutrition food on the table. So last year, following a data-driven review of the Thrifty Food Plan, the basis for SNAP benefit calculations, USDA made a significant change in the program to better align benefits with the latest dietary guidelines and other recent data. This resulted in a 21% increase, or approximately $36 per person per month in fiscal year 21. So this will enable SNAP participants the resources that they need to buy a basic diet, and more importantly, to buy nutritious foods. I believe this one change will have a profound impact on ensuring that millions of households have access to enough food as well as healthy food. And this is just one of many changes that we've taken to drive nutrition security more profoundly through our programs. And I really want to acknowledge that all of these efforts, in fact, everything related to supporting and advancing the country's food and nutrition security, hinges on prioritizing equity every step of the way. So sadly, our country has a long track record of systemic equities and discrimination, both overt and entrenched. And the implications of that can be seen in who experiences poverty and food and nutrition insecurity, as well as how they experience. So for example, households of color have about twice the rate of food insecurity relative to white households. But so it tells us it's not enough to reduce the overall rate of food insecurity. We have to close the gap between who is experiencing it and who is not, based on their demographics or where they live. And under the President's leadership, USDA has taken several actions to begin to chip away at these deeply troubling inequities. We have launched an Indigenous Food Sovereignty Initiative designed to promote and better integrate indigenous views and foodways and indigenous health through the foods that we offer through our Native American feeding programs. We're working to assess whether our programs actually exacerbate inequity rather than address them. We're working to expand online shopping in SNAP and WIC so that households who live in food deserts or otherwise have barriers to shopping for healthy food will be able to do that. We're changing the way that we do our work to center participants' perspectives in how we think about defining programs and coming up with solutions. Another critical step that is probably one folks here in Texas are familiar with is the 2022 public charge final rule, ensuring that all of those eligible for USDA's nutrition programs can access their benefits. The rule clarifies that eligible immigrants may apply for and receive benefits offered by USDA without any fear of negative implications on their immigration status. That was a truly chilling problem throughout immigrant communities, and we have a lot of work to do to share the message on that final policy, but it was a terrific step forward. We're working to beef up our support to the Emergency Food Network to make sure that those food pantries and local organizations that provide food have the resources they need to be able to deliver federal food assistance. We've got to meet folks where they're at and help equip them to be able to be partners with us. We've released new guidance on our programs prohibiting discrimination on the basis of gender identity or sexual orientation. And these are just a few examples of the work that we're trying to do on equity. We are just at the beginning of our equity journey. We have a long way to go, but we are 100% committed to embedding an equity perspective into all that we do. So all of that, right? A lot happened, a lot of learning, a USDA that is really, I think, taking up the charge of addressing immediate hardship, helping families cope, as well as thinking about a stronger future. All of that before we even got to the White House conference on hunger, nutrition, and health. I think our focus on healthy eating as a tool to improve Americans' lives became crystal clear at the White House conference that was on September 28th. Its predecessor, the pivotal conference that was held in 1969, helped begin the work that created life-changing programs like school lunches, WIC, SNAP, how we label foods, dietary guidelines. So the bar was pretty high going into this one about its potential for what it could launch. And 2 weeks ago, that second White House conference occurred, 53 years after the first, to build on the work being done, assess the issues of the present day, and energize the public and private sectors to partner around a coordinated strategy to accelerate progress and drive transformational change. Honestly, it was exactly what you were doing here. And at the conference, President Biden announced a goal of ending hunger and increasing healthy eating and physical activity by 2030 so that fewer Americans experience diet-related diseases while reducing related health disparities. We can be in America where no one wonders whether they will have enough money to put food on the table, where the healthy food choice is the easier choice, and where everyone has the same opportunity to be physically active. The president sees the conference's breathtaking goal as requiring support under 5 pillars: making healthy food more accessible, available, and affordable in all neighborhoods, integrating healthy food into doctors' toolkits, empowering all consumers to make and have access to healthy food choices, supporting everyone's access to physical activity, and getting more and better nutrition and food security research and data to inform our decisions. As a part of the conference, the administration released a national strategy, and a few of the highlights from that strategy that relate to USDA is a call to expand healthy school meals to more than 9 million school children on a pathway to universal healthy school meals for all. We talked about our goals to increase access to WIC so that more eligible households are taking advantage of this extraordinary nutrition and health intervention. We talked about doing a better job improving coordination across programs so that families enrolled in one program don't have to go through confusing and complicated paperwork in order to get into another. I mean, once you filled out a SNAP application, like honestly, is there anything else that we need to know about you? Like literally anything. It's crazy. We're looking to increase parity and access to our food distribution programs. We called on Congress to consider expanding access to SNAP for key groups. We're looking to invest in schools and the emergency food system so that they can procure more healthy, delicious food locally, and to help build out more resilient food systems, and so much more. So if you, I was really energized by the day. I just reflect with you that, and I was telling Jeremy last night that it was a wonderful day. It was a family reunion, and it was with like-minded people who were highly energized. But I have to admit, I was a little bit more energized by everything that went into it, which was hundreds of listening sessions, both some held by the administration, those held by all of our partners around the country, all the comments that people pulled together. It made the point that there are countless partners and stakeholders ready to tackle the issues. And frankly, I'm more energized about what's next. This effort is more than about just one day. Secretary Vilsack has repeatedly told us, I look forward to the conference on September 28th, but I want to know what we're doing on the 29th and the 30th and October and November and beyond. And he's serious about that. Just today, he announced $80 million in kitchen equipment grants to support schools in serving healthy meals, right? We can't just call on schools to do a better job in serving nutritious, delicious meals. We've got to be there as partners to help equip them with what they need. And you're going to hear more from USDA in the coming weeks and months about how we plan to follow up on the national strategy and leverage momentum. And if you haven't had a chance to review the strategy, I really do encourage you to take a look at our website, where it's both the White House Conference strategy document as well as USDA's report on what we're planning to do. Disparity, poverty, poor nutrition, chronic disease, discrimination, these are all really big problems. And there can be a natural human tendency to look at problems like this and think, these are just too big to take on. They are overwhelming. But the reality is that they are too big for us not to take on. And that's why partnership with academics, advocates, faith leaders, private sector partners, nonprofit leaders like all of you at gatherings like this are so important. We are embarking on an important journey, and we're not totally sure. I mean, we just don't know what the other side will look like. Where will we be in 5 years, 10 years, or even 50 years when we're reflecting back on this conference? But we have to embark on this mission together. Driven by a shared vision, driven by belief that we can do it, knowing that we must find a pathway to a healthier, more equitable, just future. Recently, I had the opportunity to visit with the World Central Kitchen, and some of you may know it's run by their founder, Chef Jose Andres. He's a local restaurateur in DC and just an extraordinary humanitarian. He was a keynote speaker at the White House Conference. And basically, you might know him more as wherever there's a natural disaster or a conflict zone, he's like right there, setting up a local kitchen and feeding people. And he talks a lot about how food isn't what it needs to be right now. It isn't always healthy, and there's just not always enough for many people. And at times, food is even weaponized. But he talks about how we need to turn that around. And he says, and I'm just going to quote him shamelessly, food should be fuel, it should be medicine, food should reflect culture and community, food should be security and peace. Food must strengthen family. This charge is our charge, right? Transformational change that centers food in our lives in a positive, powerful, healthy way. This is kind of an enterprise level challenge, and at USDA we're so grateful that so many partners are stepping forward to own a piece of the solution. Because every time we talk about these issues, every time we reach out to just one more person or one more group to coordinate and to collaborate, our voice gets a little bit louder, our reach gets a little bit broader, and our toolkit gets a little bit more powerful. The last few years have been incredibly challenging, yes, but they have shown our grit and our fortitude. We have overcome unbelievable hurdles and persevered in order to continue to serve our communities. And now we have a chance to forge ahead, using lessons learned from the pandemic as a springboard for a better tomorrow. It goes without saying that this community and all who you represent are key drivers in achieving that vision. In fact, many of you just need to design the vision. And I'm really calling on all of you for your help. Communities across America are counting on our promises. So let's not wait any longer. Let's build back better together. Thank you. All right. And now you have some questions for me, I think.
Great. Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me? Okay, perfect. So the first question is that really piggybacking on what you've talked about, that COVID taught us how to feed children during the summer. One by ending congregate requirements, another by allowing multi-meal pickup. So how do we make that permanent? And kind of a piggyback question is, how can advocates in this room support the administration with important needed legislation?
Thanks. Well, I think that it taught us those two things, as well as that summer EBT is a really powerful tool, and putting resources into parents' pockets so that they can buy food for their kids during the summer months when school is out is another important intervention. All three of those things require legislation. Now, I will say we can do one more year of summer. Assuming the public health emergency ends sometime in 2023, which I think it will, we will have the ability to do one more year of summer EBT. But for any of those three things to continue permanently, we will need legislation. So you talk about helping meet. And the administration has put forward proposals on summer EBT. I think there are congressional leaders who are looking at the other two ideas that you brought forward, as well as other ideas to strengthen summer, like perhaps an enhanced reimbursement rate. So I think that is action that you all can take as communities and engaging members of Congress. We really hope to see a child nutrition reauthorization in the coming months.
We do too. Okay, a couple of questions supply chain related. So this says food prices are up 25, 50% on some items. Store shelves are quickly emptied of key items. What's happening? How will we get food prices back to normal or reasonable levels? What can we do to try to address those as issues?
Yeah, I think those are big issues. So USDA has got a couple of efforts underway. The Secretary received, basically, Congress provided us with a significant investment so that the Secretary is now turning around to work on food systems transformation. So investments that will make our food supply chain more resilient. So for example, trying to diversify meat processing, to not just have it be in a few large packers, or investments that will help local growers and build local markets. So the other side of the house at USDA is doing a lot of work on making sure that we are investing at those pain points in our supply chain to improve for better resilience in the long run. At FNS, we're mostly focused on doing things to make sure we're helping families cope. So that is, of course, all of our programs do adjust for inflation, which is so folks have more or maintain their food purchasing power. We've made investments in the emergency food system, and I hear you that as much as we have done, we just announced $1.5 billion in additional funding. We hear from our emergency food partners that it is just not nearly enough, right? That they are losing support at a time when demand remains very high. So we're in this. We're not going anywhere, and really welcome ideas and suggestions. But it is also true, while it remains high, food inflation is starting to abate. The war in Ukraine obviously is also a big key driver here. But I'll stop there. We'll wonk out on economics.
And I will say, the questions keep coming in. We have a stack of great questions here. We aren't going to have time to get to all of them, but I want to assure everyone that these questions will go directly to Ms. Dean, so she's aware of what you're asking. So a couple of more we do have time for. One is thanking you for the White House conference and how great it was, and really highlighting that one idea or key theme at the conference was that we really need to be elevating those with lived experience as we move forward in the next phase of coming out of the conference. So what do you see as opportunities that we have to advance that concept of lived experience, especially as Congress begins its work on the Farm Bill, for example, and other legislation?
Yeah, that's great. There's actually a lot to that question. So the White House conference, I believe, had 60 individuals who were either participants in federal nutrition programs or had been and were there representing their communities, and we were so grateful to national partners like Feeding America and FRAC and Share Our Strength, who, working with local partners, helped identify folks and then help support them through the process of coming, because that was a big ask for these individuals to come to DC and to attend the conference, and they were leaving behind a lot of responsibilities, and so it was wonderful to have them there and have their perspective. I think that's work we all need to be doing more of. I mean, certainly for us, I'll speak for us, but I do think overall, and that work is hard because you want it to be, it's hard and it's easy, right? Listening, integrating the perspective of those who use the programs, who understand what their community needs. We just heard about that this morning at the Jubilee Market, about spending time in the community as you decide what you're going to do, right? So empowerment, not, what is the phrase? Empowerment, not relief. Thank you. Yes. So I think the more that all of you can be grounding yourselves in your work and your asks in what you think the community, what you hear the community needs, is really important. But we've got a lot of work to do to build the infrastructure to connect those voices to the way policy is made and the process and the tables that we all sit at. I do want to change it, and I'm open to it. And so the more that if you set something up and you invite us, we will be there to listen. That's important to us. But I also want us to be really thoughtful and respectful for how we do this work, because it can go a lot of different ways in terms of whether we're actually listening or whether we're using. And I'm not saying anyone here would do that, but I'm just, if where we sit in DC, this is careful, thoughtful work to be respectful, but that is fundamental. And so, for example, in our WIC, we did listening sessions for our WIC program as we thought about, why are people not participating in WIC? What can we do? And we held 20 listening sessions. We had over 200 WIC participants and eligible non-participants give their perspective. And honestly, it was not aligned with what FNS was telling me, right? So you had to, it's like, okay, so I don't know who's right, but we got to go reconcile that, because we can't go down a path that isn't validated by the people we're actually trying to reach. So that kind of work is really important. And for many of us, it requires changing the way we do things, how we listen, and the length of time we need to integrate. So sorry, I'm rambling a little bit on this one, but it's a big thorny issue and a really critical one.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Okay, last question, and we have a few questions around SNAP. You yourself mentioned how arduous the application process is, the paperwork. So one question here about the participation rate of SNAP eligible households. A lot of you know it's much lower. And that's often because of the paperwork and compliance process. It's often seen as not worth it. Another person who works with the senior population pointing out that a lot of seniors that are on a fixed income, they don't mess with it because they assume the benefits are so low that it's not going to matter for them. So the question is, how can we make the process easier for them so that accessing this proven resource is just better?
Yeah, so one is starting by listening to the voices, say, of seniors who are saying it's not worth it to me. Let's unpack that and understand it. What if you could apply for SNAP at the Social Security Administration at the same time you were applying for your Social Security benefits, your Part D prescription drug subsidy, and maybe Medicaid paying your Medicare premiums? That's quite a package. Now it's starting to get pretty real, right? That package is $8,000 to $12,000 a year. That one visit starts to become more meaningful, and it's at a place that maybe you feel more comfortable. So that's my theory of change, but who knows if that's on point for the community we're trying to reach, right? We need to explore options like that. And also, I think we at USDA need to be doing the work to communicate to states our very clear, unambiguous expectation that they are reaching all eligibles who want to participate with a simple, painless process. I won't say easy, but at least painless, where individuals are being helped through the application process. And I think that is something Secretary Vilsack and Secretary Becerra of HHS, who oversees Medicaid and TANF, want to work on together, a call to action together to governors to say, hey, we've put out this federal program, and we want to work with you to make sure that your state is offering it in a way that eligible households can access it. And then the work begins, right? Because we have to really make sure we're understanding why they're not participating, where are the pain points, and what's it going to take to open up this critical resource.
Great. Thank you so much. Will y'all join me in thanking
Oh, thank you.
Ms. Dean?